Sheng Yeo from OrionVM. Welcome to our show here at Ignite in Infra AI.
Hi, Keith. How are you? Thanks for having me here.
No, it's my pleasure. Hey, a real technical question.
Yes.
What is OrionVM?
So OrionVM is a cloud infrastructure provider. We write really amazing virtualization software, and we're now using that to help virtualize and cloudify the GPU age.
That sounds exciting. Hot area right now.
Yeah, definitely. We're seeing a lot of demand from GPU providers, data centers, and application providers to help them with their cloud journey.
Good. Later on, I'll ask you about some GPUs that you can get me on the cheap.
Yeah.
Kidding aside, though, talk to me about how you differentiate yourself in a crowded, competitive market.
Yeah, so I think there's obviously a lot of players in the cloud market today. The key thing that from Orion's background is that we've actually built our own cloud infrastructure virtualization software. When we started Orion 14 years ago, we looked at HPC, we looked at supercomputers to be able to find the best of breed technologies, and we actually added a lot of enterprise grade reliability to that. Roll forward 10 years, that same technology is incredibly relevant for AI, and AI is very much like a HPC environment. So for those who don't know, HPC is high performance computing. We think of AI as actually the movement that's actually moving a lot of the demand for HPC into the enterprise space.
Right.
So a lot of the technology that was built for supercomputers is now becoming incredibly relevant because AI is effectively a supercomputer behind it.
Brilliant. You use the word cloudify.
Yes.
Tell me, what do you mean by cloudify? That's interesting.
It's a great question. So the way we think about the world today is that cloudification in our terms is basically helping companies move towards the cloud. And we've been talking about that for 10 to 15 years from an application perspective. But interestingly enough, with AI, there's been a whole surge of AI chip manufacturers, a whole surge of data centers that all want to be part of the AI race. And a lot of them are actually winding the clock back to delivering infrastructure as bare metal with no automation and orchestration. So when we generally use the term cloudify, we mean actually bring those providers forward into the cloud age. So we think about chip to cloud, data center to cloud, as well as application to cloud. And so the idea is really helping those providers deliver things as a subscription rather than another box, another chip that they would have to sell to their customers.
Cool. So how many companies are still on-prem with their stuff? And because the assumption I have is everyone's moved already to the cloud.
Yeah, it's a great question. And the enterprise world is primarily moved to the cloud. But what we're seeing is a massive shift back to actually moving to on-premise and private data centers. So a good example is I was talking to somebody at a big server manufacturer, and they were rolling out servers back into supermarkets. So supermarkets went through having on-premise servers, moving it to the cloud, and now with AI facial rec, AI loss prevention, as well as self-checkout terminals, they all need on-premise infrastructure to make that decision real time if that guy should be allowed to walk out from the shop, right? And so that's the challenge with AI is a lot of the amount of data is so big that people are moving the compute back to the data rather than the data to the cloud. And so that's the shift. So you'll probably hear a lot in the market today about moving AI to the edge or infrastructure to the edge. And so a lot of it's doing a full 180 back towards being on premise.
Interesting. Tell me about Blaze and Polaris.
Yeah. So as you asked before about cloudification, we work with Blaze and Polaris as two example customers of ours that we're allowed to talk about. Blaze, for example, is a very efficient AI inferencing chip. They've built an alternative for video and image recognition as an alternative to using a GPU. And so with Blaze, what we've done is they've traditionally sold their hardware as a chip. And the challenge with that is a lot of people that want to prototype and work on it and develop are used to a cloud model. The world's been taught over the last 10 years to use everything under the cloud. And so what we help Blaze do is cloudify their chip. We virtualized it, we pushed it into our cloud, and now both Orion and Blaze are able to sell cloud servers with their GSP enabled and virtualized within that environment.
It's funny too, because again, to just a modest student of this, NVIDIA owns the world of AI chips.
Yes.
But now we're talking about custom chip development and taking niche kind of approach.
For sure. So I think the way I like to tell the story for this is previously, when NVIDIA released a lot of the GPUs, people referred to them as GPUs or general purpose GPUs, and they're exactly that. They're very great general purpose chips. But what ultimately ends up happening is people are building specific ASICs for specific workloads. So and it's all about efficiency. If you're trying to process video feeds for For video, for threat detection, for example, you can do that more efficiently on an ASIC that's been designed for video and not waste all the other components that you would have on a GPU. And so what we're seeing is a lot of money and capital going into developing custom chips for specific workloads.
Huge expense,
Yes.
huge market,
Yes.
huge growth. So what do you see happening? How do you see this market playing out? Is it going to continue to expand and get more competitive?
Yeah, definitely. So I think the same thing that happened with cloud is going to happen with AI. There's going to be a lot of consolidation, a lot of players that come, a lot of players that go. But I think ultimately what's going to end up happening, as it does in every kind of revolution that goes through, is the industry will settle on a couple of leaders and they'll become the standard. And I think then you end up with the equivalence of the existing hyperscalers, but for the AI race.
Hyperscalers continue to shift around a little bit.
They
Do
do.
you think we'll see one dominant player and then everybody else, below that, or will there be competition at the NVIDIA layer?
So it's an interesting it's an interesting question. Like a lot of the hyperscalers today, their role in AI is interesting. They've built an architecture primarily built for hosting applications, web applications, and a lot of new players in the space today that have built GPU farms are focused on the training element of AI. What we're seeing in the market and what a lot of people are talking to us about is basically this training that's happening is there's debates about how long that training is going to exist.
Yeah.
And at some point, the primary workload is going to move from fine tuning and training to inference. And that transition will happen as workloads actually start getting deployed into production. And the interesting thing is, does that then move back to the hyperscalers? Because what we're seeing a lot of people do is train on these alternative providers, but then go back to the hyperscaler to run the application because the hyperscaler's got the full web stack that you're used to. But the thing about AI, a lot of people forget that training is only a small element. Inferencing is only a small element. It all actually ties back into generally a web app or something else that you're trying to deliver, or an agent, and that typically lives in a usual hyperscale world. So.
And you live in a crazy world now and it's getting crazier.
Yes.
How are you going to keep Orion on the right path of growth and stay away from all the risk out there?
The great thing for us is really that we are trying to be the picks and shovels and the gold rush for AI. And so we're not picking any specific players and backing any specific players.
Mm-hmm.
At our level, which is the infrastructure behind AI, and funnily enough, we're at the AI conference today. So at our level, everything is universal. And the great thing is that we can power 10 different AI applications and not take the risk on who's going to succeed. I think there's a lot of money going into specific agents, specific training of models, and those companies will struggle a lot more because they are going to struggle to work out who leads, who doesn't succeed and things. But the ones that do succeed obviously explode, right? They do very well.
What do you think of a trend, GPU as a service?
GPU as a service is providing GPUs for rental to allow customers to do training or inferencing for their workloads. What we've seen is a lot of the GPU as a service providers have actually come from the crypto space. A lot of the first GPU as a service providers had power rights, data center rights, and everything from the crypto world for cryptocurrencies. But the challenge is actually these days is there's two distinct types of GPU providers. There's the people that have built infrastructure primarily for enterprise, and then there's the other people that have come from the crypto world where we've heard of challenges of being able to keep reliability up in the data centers and the ability to cool that infrastructure because running a mission critical workload was never their bread and butter. And so we're seeing, and eventually those two worlds will converge and we'll go from there.
Takes a little pressure off, though, moving from CapEx to OpEx and letting me rent and get charged on a per use basis.
Yes. So one key thing that we're seeing with GPU as a service providers is we almost think of it as a regression to some level. The whole world over the last 10 years has moved to virtualization, to automation, and being able to deliver everything as an API. And with GPU as a service providers, most of them are delivered as bare metal. They're delivered as someone's going to the data center, they're cabling a server, they're giving you a cluster. But the biggest issue that people are having with that is that cluster is fixed and it's built for purpose A, and it's very hard to recompose that environment. So what we're seeing the demand for actually is the second wave of virtualization, as we like to call it, which is virtualizing the GPU farms rather than virtualizing the CPU farms. And so that's where Orion plays. Orion is effectively taking all of our smarts and learnings in virtualization and applying it to AI infrastructure And the biggest demand we're seeing is the ability to take a GPU as a service farm and virtualize it for that particular provider to be able to sell infrastructure to multiple customers, to be able to take a large cluster and chop it into 3 or 4 smaller ones. A great example is actually in the research space, the medical space. A lot of people are looking towards GPUs to be able to help with things like cancer research, to be able to look through large amounts of data to analyze trends in medical data. But the challenge is a lot of those research orgs want to build one GPU farm, and they need to be able to share that. Historically, sharing those clusters has been done by time sharing, like with traditional supercomputers. But if you can virtualize an environment, you could have 1 week where a researcher had the entire cluster, the next week where 4 researchers sharing a quarter each. And I think that's where Orion's software comes in, is the ability to take one standalone cluster and virtualize it into multiple smaller ones, either for the requirement to divvy that up between researchers, or if you're a GPU provider, you want one client to be able to give it back to you and repurpose it for another client in a matter of minutes, rather than sending a team down to recable the entire data center.
Wow.
So that's what I mean by regressing.
Yeah.
Like, in a way that we did all of that in cloud, and we've gone back and lost all of that for AI. Because
you kind of just have to update the playbook a little bit.
Exactly. It's the same playbook, just replayed for the AI.
Fascinating. Tell me, what concerns you, though? I mean, there's so much in terms of opportunity, but where are your concerns in the growth of the marketplace?
So I think the concerns are really going to be about longevity of certain workloads. The first question I ask every time somebody comes to us with an opportunity is, one, who's paying the bill?
Good
and
question.
How long are they going to be around for? Because the challenge is there's a lot of money going into rolling out this infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a 5 megawatt, 10 megawatt, 100 megawatt data center built for one specific startup, what happens if that startup runs out of money? And I think when we talk to data centers, that's the question that's top of mind, is that concentration risk of the customer being a single customer is either amazing if they continue to scale, or not amazing. And I think for us, it's just making sure that, like I said, we're pretty agnostic in terms of who we work with. We're backing and underpinning many workloads. So I think that's the play a lot of people are taking. As long as you de-risk it by not going and concentrating all your workloads or customers into one bucket, then you can take a bit more risk and you actually go through and roll out infrastructure, but know that if client A doesn't use it, client B can use it. And I think that's the challenge actually with building things that are so specific. Like certain chip manufacturers are building things for a specific customer, and the challenge is what happens if that customer doesn't exist tomorrow.
So Sheng, remind me again where Orion started and give me the path to where you got to today.
So OrionVM was started by 3 very young founders. I laugh because Orion should have not succeeded, and we just kept pushing and pushing and pushing until we're here today. So OrionVM was started by 3 university friends in Sydney, Australia. And we said, all right, we're going to build a better cloud infrastructure. Very naive words for very young people back then. The average age of the founding team was 18 and a half.
Oh, wow.
And so if I was to start Orion again today, I don't know if we would. It's been such a journey, and we've learned so much. Orion's biggest challenge actually setting up was actually getting trust. As you can imagine, with a team that's average age was 18 and a half, pitching to very strict corporate businesses to host their mission critical applications, it wasn't easy. Like, our biggest challenge was actually convincing people that, okay, you can host your application with Orion and we'll do the right thing by you. And I think we just really had to prove it. The interesting thing about AI today is actually it's a lot easier to get started than cloud, because a lot of the workloads are not mission critical. A lot of the workloads now is if you're trying to train something and the cluster goes down, you restart it, right? For us, when we built this, we went down, e-commerce stores went down, transport networks went down, phone systems went down. And so
I bet there's some good stories there.
There are definitely. But the thing is that you just got to, I think from a startup perspective and from an Orion perspective, you basically just build from the ground up, and we look backwards and we say, hey, how's it already been such a long time? And you realize that you just keep building from strength to strength to strength and making sure that you do the right thing by the customer. One thing that we're very cognizant of is always doing the right thing by our customers. And that has held us tried and true for the last 15 years as we've built the company.
That's a good business rule to apply.
Yeah, definitely.
And something for everybody to pay attention to.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for sharing the story. It's really fascinating.
No problems at all. Appreciate you having me on today.
Yeah, and safe flight back to Sydney.
Yeah, definitely. We're going there tomorrow. So I appreciate it.
Oh, good. Well, thanks again for
Thank you. Appreciate it.